Morning everyone, my name's Matt, I'm an economics graduate and accountant and in recent weeks have turned into something of an aspiring YouTuber. I'm now on my 7th or 8th video on the new channel, so I'm pretty sure that qualifies me as something of an expert. Anyway, the gist of today's video is to talk over 3 different things that I've picked up over the last sort of year, certainly the last few months, that have really helped me stay on top of both motivation and also productivity, with the ultimate aim, I suppose, of maintaining a sense of self-fulfillment in these really weird times. I think I'm probably working as well now when it comes to my day job as I ever have done before, and on top of that I've been able to find the time to start this YouTube channel. I've certainly been eating a lot better recently. I was playing loads and loads of golf before the most recent lockdown, and I've been able to just keep on top of my exercise as a whole, really. The exercise point is probably helped by the Apple Watch, my video to which I will link somewhere around here. So anyway, without further ado, let's crack on and I will talk through the 3 things that I've kept in mind really that have made all that stuff possible. So point number 1 is understanding that something called the flow state is very much a thing. So here's the definition for you. In positive psychology, a flow state, also colloquially known as being in the zone, is the mental state in which a person performing some activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus and full involvement. The most obvious example of this is sports people, particularly golfers. They'll walk off the course after the round of their life and say things like, "Oh, I just wasn't thinking out there, I was just doing what came naturally, I was in the zone. It was all a bit of a blur." And this idea of being in the zone obviously isn't anything that's particularly earth-shattering, particularly new to anybody, but I think for me, the extent to which that you're actually able to harness it on a day-to-day basis just by being aware of how it comes about is something that's really, really useful. I think it can feel difficult to achieve, but in practice it's something that you can actively aim for with each little batch of work you do between each break you take. All you need is a pretty clear idea of what actually needs to be done, and then to break this bigger task down into individual chunks and just do them. In my experience, it's much harder to get into the zone when I'm unsure of exactly what I should be doing, what I need to prioritise, in what order it needs to be done. And I end up keeping an eye on a few things at once and constantly flicking between documents and different emails, and everything gets a little bit bitty and I really just lose that sort of focus. I saw a really good video the other day by Elizabeth Phillips, I think that's how you pronounce her surname. I'll put the link to that down in the description below. And she'd entitled it "How I Procrastinate Productively." And I think she was doing herself a disservice there really, because what she was actually talking about was just starting work for 5 minutes, even if you don't want to, and then seeing how you feel. If you want to stop after 5, you can. I don't think she explicitly linked these 2 points, but what she's really talking about there is start for 5 minutes and hopefully you'll trick yourself into falling into the flow and you end up not needing to stop, even though before you started it's something that you didn't really fancy. Definitely check that video out for a little bit more detail, and what I'm talking about will make a lot more sense. So all I'd say, just to wrap up on the flow state, is the idea of consciously keeping it at the front of your mind. If it's not something you've deliberately spent the time to think about before, then I get that it can sound nice in theory, but you'd be skeptical as to whether it works in practice. What I'd say is give it a conscious try, and I think you'd hopefully be surprised with how well it works. So moving on to point number 2, this is going to be the importance of a morning routine. Again, this is something I've really tried to make a conscious effort to stay aware of, and it's something I've benefited from massively over the last few months. I now try and make sure as many of my mornings as possible include both a walk or a run if I'm feeling adventurous, and enough time built into them so that I don't feel rushed as soon as I get out of bed. The bad news is that you do need to get up at a decent time to make all of this possible. Sorry about that. So as I mentioned, I have treated myself to an Apple Watch, primarily because I'm a sucker for anything that Apple release that looks new and shiny and cool, and how I use it is have the active calorie target set to such a level that typically it means that I need to do 2 pieces of exercise a day in order to tick it off. I've generally got 3 windows of time available to me in the day, that being the morning, possibly a quick break at lunch, and the evening. And the logic I work by is that if I actually miss the morning slot, I've got very little room to manoeuvre for the rest of the day in terms of squeezing in 2 more pieces of exercise. So I like to get something positive ticked off first thing in the morning, and whatever happens for the rest of the day, no one can take that away from you. That's been a success. The day hasn't been a waste. The second aspect of this is to build enough time into the routine to make sure the morning isn't a huge rush and panic from start to finish. I often find that as much as I feel tired when I first wake up and struggle to get my head off the pillow, having extra time in bed or an extra lie in doesn't actually change this. I'll still feel tired just half an hour later, so I normally just try and get up there and then. And I think all of this sort of feeds into helping out with point number 1, in that it's a good opportunity to get straight in your head all of the different tasks and all the different chunks that you need to get done that day. And if you're panicking in terms of running to the shower, getting out, getting dry, quickly out for a walk, getting back, logging onto the laptop at the same time as you're still having a coffee and all that sort of stuff, you're not in that sort of clear mind frame where you're really ready to target the day in the most efficient way possible. All of that said, the morning routine is difficult when it's -1 outside and frosty and the sun's not coming up till 8 in the morning, so that's making things tight for time. In the spring and summer it is way easier, but I think it's one of those things you've just got to try and get into the habit of, and that sort of takes away an element of the hardship. And finally, point number 3, I am stealing from Professor Cecil Parkinson, who is the founder, if that's the right word, of Parkinson's law. Not the most original name, but this law references the behavioural phenomenon that humans rarely finish a task in less than the allocated time. It works the same way for having no money left over at the end of the month, even after a pay rise, or moving from a smaller to a larger home and still finding that everywhere is cluttered and full of stuff. It's just human nature to fill the time and space and spend the money available to us. Our phones fill up with photos and our cupboards fill up with clothes. And understanding that is all very well, but the real question is, how do you combat something that is an innate human behaviour? And the answer is with difficulty, but by actively acknowledging it exists for a start, and then trying to set really tight, really strict deadlines with yourself when it comes to getting work done. So what this might look like in my job is saying, okay, it's 11 AM now, I'm going to give myself 45 minutes to complete this piece of Excel analysis that needs to be done, and another 45 minutes to do the write-up onto one of our PowerPoint slides. And then I'd firmly have in my head that, okay, this piece of work consistent of these 2 elements is going to be finished by 12:30. And by trying to hit these really challenging deadlines, I end up not wasting any time at all for the entire course of that 90 minutes. And the key win here really is that the analysis in Excel might end up taking me 50 minutes to do. But if I hadn't narrowed my focus from the outset, it probably could have dragged its way out to be the full hour and a half or 2 hours. The key thing here really is staying aware of the fact that this inherent limitation on your brain probably does exist, and it's going to be something that takes a conscious effort to combat. And just quickly before we finish, I'm going to give you a little bonus point number 4, which is that if all else fails, I'd recommend throwing money at the problem. The first thing I'd recommend is definitely buying yourself a second screen if you haven't got one already. The impact of this is one of those things where people don't know what they don't know. Whenever I speak to my dad about this sort of thing, trying to persuade him to get on board the second screen hype, he's like, oh no, I've never used a second screen, I'm coping just fine. But what ends up happening is he caves, ends up using the second screen for a day, and then thinks his life's changed. I really would get on this hype. I'm sure it's possible that somebody that's out there with 3 or 4 screens, like you see all the bankers using, is tearing their hair out at the fact that I'm only using 2. And maybe that's something I need to get on board with in the future. So yeah, that's definitely something to try. If you've already got the 2-screen setup nailed, then I would recommend throwing your money at some stationery instead. A new set of pens, a new notepad, a new desk lamp, anything that just adds a little bit of novelty to what can become quite a monotonous situation, just working from home every day. Give yourself a little shot in the arm and something that you look forward to using the next day. Maybe I'm just a real nerd and that doesn't resonate with anybody, but can't beat a brand new set of pens in my opinion. So that covers everything I think today, guys. Just as a quick recap over the 3 main points that I referenced, I think the most important thing is just keeping at the forefront of your mind all of these sort of wider factors that are at play, making sure that you're not just sort of going through the motions and drifting from one day to the next without assessing how well things are actually going. I actually find it really interesting to think about little sorts of efficiency gains here and there, day in, day out. So if that isn't something that you've already got an eye on, either from a perspective of Parkinson's law or morning routines or whatever it may be, then it probably could be worth doing so. But that's just me. There's probably plenty of other things that work really well for other people. And I'm always open to hearing new suggestions for anything that I might be missing out on, so feel free to drop me a note down below and tell me what I should be doing differently too. Hope you enjoyed the video today then, guys. That's everything from me. I hope you see you next time, and stay safe. Bye bye.